Hello, Citadel fans. This is Citadel GrayLine broadcasting right here on Facebook Live, as well as those of you who listen to us each and every week via our podcast option. I'm executive producer Jon Rawl in for a vacationing Kyle Weaver. Also, Paul Evangelist is out this week. All have special orders, and we are giving them their proper time off. But we have one more week of the Citadel GrayLine next week, and we've got a very special guest coming your way, so make sure you tune in for that. We are not at our Toast Mount Pleasant location. If you're watching our Facebook Live broadcast, you'll see a little bit of a change here today. We're in our IPS packaging studio, way west of the Ashley, but we do have our steady co-host on with us, Jeff Hartsell of the Post and Courier. Jeff, hello, welcome into the Citadel GrayLine.
And I'm coming to you live from my bedroom at Hallahan Court in Mount Pleasant.
Now, you didn't have to share all that kind of good stuff. At least tell us what colors, what's the theme there in the Hartsell bedroom?
Right now, it's a mess.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought you might have Citadel Blue.
That's the theme.
You know, Jeff, I do a daily 2-hour show called The Y'all Show that some of you may have listened to before. And I just discovered, as a guy who doesn't get to live in Charleston full-time like many of you watching or listening to this, including our own Jeff Hartsell, that there's something called Haint Blue or Gullah Blue. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. I've heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Post and Courier, your compatriots there, I think, just did a great story. It's the color that you'll sometimes see on ceilings in the Charleston area. It looks like Citadel Blue, to be honest with you. And it was
right, or on the ceilings of porches. I think.
Yeah. More importantly, on porches and around windowsills. But it was done because it was supposed to keep ghosts out of your house. That's the legend of it.
Okay.
So who knew that we would start today's Citadel GrayLine talking colors? But we try to illustrate all kinds of things here on the GrayLine. Hey, if you want to connect to us here, we welcome that. We've got a number you can call anytime you want to. It's 803-816-1170. You can call or text that number. And again, Jon Rawl filling in for both Kyle Weaver and Paul Evangelist today. But glad to do it, as we're going to have a good time talking with Jeff and filling everybody in on Citadel sports, as we're now in our 13th year of the Citadel GrayLine. All right, Jeff, first and foremost this week, we lost I guess you could call him a legend in the Citadel world. He's been around the Citadel for decades, and unfortunately he was killed in a car crash over the weekend. Ted Byrne, the former voice of the Bulldogs, who was with the Citadel back in the late 80s and 90s, and then kind of went away a little while, but was still involved with Kirkman Broadcasting. And in recent years, Ted Byrne's kind of popped up again on the Citadel scene, helping with the radio broadcast, and a friend of yours, and we lost him this week in a tragic car accident in Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, what a tremendous loss for the Charleston sports community and the community at large. Ted was a familiar voice on Charleston airwaves for about 40 years. And as you mentioned, he was once voice of the Citadel Bulldogs. He was the voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles for 10 years. I don't know, a lot of people might not be aware of that. And a member of the Charleston Baseball Hall of Fame for his work with the Charleston Rainbows and the Charleston River Dogs minor league baseball teams back in the day. And just this past season, he was the color analyst for Citadel broadcast, along with Luke Morrow, who is the new voice of the Bulldogs. So yeah, just a tremendous loss for everyone who knew Ted, especially the folks over there at Kirkman Broadcasting. I know they're still in shock over the news from the weekend, and it'll be tough for them and for everyone to go on without Ted, but we'll have to do it. And I feel fortunate I was able to give Ted a ride home from Elon this season, because Luke Morrow had some car trouble, so I drove Ted back from the Elon game, and we got to spend 5 hours together. And he had beaten cancer in recent years, so he had a lot of encouraging words for me and my family as we went through a similar thing at that time of the year. And he also told me a story I found interesting about the 1990 football game when the Citadel beat South Carolina in Columbia. That game apparently was not on TV, and there was no tape of Ted's broadcast of the game, and the AD at the time, Walt Nadzak, wanted to sell copies of the game on tape, and I don't know if there were DVDs at that time or whatever, but at least on tape. So Ted got the play-by-play of the game and recreated his broadcast over the game film, the coach's game film, and the Citadel was able to sell those tapes as souvenirs of that great victory in Columbia. So Ted could do it all, even broadcast a game after it was over.
Yeah, and Jeff, just for old time's sake, let's take you back to October 1990 and hear a little sample of Ted Byrne, voice of the Bulldogs in 1990, as Charlie Taft, Jack Douglas, a guy who was a fantastic defensive player named Tony Skoll, and more, went into Williams-Brice Stadium and shocked the Gamecocks, the first of two cock shocks, the first two of what we hope will be many cock shocks. And here's a little bit of that audio sample of Ted Byrne doing the play-by-play of that big win in 1990. And that was a little portion of Ted Byrne, voice of the Bulldogs, rest in peace, who we lost over the last few days in a tragic car accident. Ted Byrne, who many in the Citadel world, he was always available, usually at football games, usually very busy. I got to know him a little bit because of my own radio experience. In fact, this show, Citadel GrayLine, at one time aired on the AM station in Charleston that carries Citadel football games, and I worked with Ted on that endeavor. And I often wanted to talk to him on game days when I was at Johnson-Hagan Stadium, but he was so darn busy that I really didn't have a chance to talk to him. But Jeff, sadly, it was just 2 weeks prior to his death, 2 weeks to the day. You and I were both in Chattanooga, and after a tough loss to the Mocs, we were down on the sideline, you and I, waiting to talk to Brent Thompson, and Ted Byrne was also down there because Thompson, like he normally does, catches up with Byrne walking off the field. Well, that was such an emotional loss that Thompson didn't want to talk to Ted Byrne immediately. He had to go in the locker room first. So Ted was kind of lingering around. And I captured all of this on Facebook Live. If you go to our Citadel GrayLine Facebook Live page, you'll see me as we start the video waiting on Ted Byrne to finish his portion. And Ted had his usually comical way of handling tough situations as he did that day with Coach Thompson. I know you were also there, Jeff, to see that interview.
Yeah, that was typical Ted, and he was a real radio pro, I call it. He could do it all behind the scenes, in front of the mic. He was a producer, and I don't know what all goes on at a radio station, but a general manager, and just could run things behind the scenes or take over and fill in at the College of Charleston. He was the play-by-play man for the Cougars when they won the NAIA National Championship way back in 1983, I was. So Ted had done it all. He had seen it all. He used to do Paul Johnson's weekly television show when he was at Georgia Southern. So he got to know Paul Johnson very well. And so, yeah, he'd seen it all, done it all. And as you said, now he's resting in peace.
Jeff, what can you tell us about the arrangements?
They are going to be next Tuesday at Seacoast Church here in Mount Pleasant, the church where Ted went to church every Sunday.
Okay. And did he have family that we need to keep in our thoughts and prayers?
Of course, yeah. He had 2 sons, of which he was extremely proud. And then he has his most recent family, I guess you would call it. I don't know a lot about them, but he was loved by many. And yes, definitely keep his family in your thoughts and prayers.
And Jeff did a really good feature on Ted Byrne's passing in the Post and Courier. If you don't live in Charleston and can't pick up a paper copy, go and check it out on postandcourier.com. I know, Jeff, you probably don't like these type of stories, but you did a good job.
There's been too many lately. I wrote Ted's obit in the morning, and then I went to John McKissick's funeral that afternoon. And, of course, we lost Charlie Taft recently, the great former Citadel coach. And, of course, John McKissick is the winningest coach of all time, the legend at Somerville High School. So it's been a tough few weeks here in the Charleston sports community, that's for sure.
And, of course, McKissick with a Citadel connection, as his grandson is Joe Call, former quarterback for the Bulldogs, who I think is still the quarterback, or rather the head coach at Somerville High School.
He is the current head coach at Somerville High School. That is correct, carrying on his grandfather's legacy.
John McKissick died on Thanksgiving Day, I think it was, at the age of 93. So a sad
that is correct.
Passing there in the Palmetto State with the winningest football coach at all levels. And you know he's a big deal, Jeff, when I'm tuning in on Thanksgiving Day to see some of the NFL games and crawling across the bottom of ESPN all day is John McKissick, winningest coach ever, dies at age 93.
Yeah, it was national news, and Danny Ford was at his funeral, and of course many of his high school coaching rivals, who also became great friends with Coach McKissick. So a big turnout on Monday in Somerville to say goodbye to a coaching legend.
All right. Well, we appreciate all the coverage you got there, Jeff. Let's try to get you some happier stories going forward if we can. Well, the 2019 Citadel football season came to an end a couple weeks ago against Wofford. What ended up, in my opinion, Jeff, a rather disappointing end, especially when 2 weeks out, the Citadel had everything in front of them. A win at Chattanooga, they're probably going to make the playoffs. And then if they could win both Chattanooga and Wofford, they would definitely be in the playoffs, in my opinion. And, of course, they would because they'd have won the Southern Conference. And they lost both at Chattanooga and at home against Wofford. And, Jeff, I don't know about you, but I'm still trying to get over this. It's tough.
Yeah, and what a strange season. The highs of beating Georgia Tech, a Power 5 team, and then the big win at Furman, and then to end up at 6-6 and 4-4, a 500 record all the way around, just kind of leaves a strange feeling of what to make of that season. And you're right, the end was very disappointing but just the fact that they recovered from an 0-2 start to the season and an 0-2 start in SoCon play to stay in contention for the league title up until the final 2 weeks was quite an accomplishment. And the one that will really stick with Brent Thompson, I think, is the Chattanooga game, a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter with about 8 minutes to go in that game, and they can't hold on to it. And that would have obviously made the Wofford game a huge game. And I think after they lost Chattanooga, just a lot of wind went out of the sails for that Wofford game. And disappointing season in the end, but a fun season overall, I think, with many highs and many lows. And Brent Thompson, that was his fourth season at the Citadel. He went 10-2 that first year, but in the 3 years since, he's been right around 500 in each of the 3 seasons. So I know he's determined to find a way to break out of that 500 mold and get back toward the top of the league. You have to remember they were picked to finish 7th in the SoCon this year, and Brent said that was a flat-out joke when the poll came out, and they ended up finishing 4th, tied for 4th. So he was right, but not as right as he could have been. This is the way I think of it.
Well, all in all, Citadel fans don't want to have 500-win seasons. They want to have a winning record. I know Coach Thompson, the players also wanted that, and it was just right there, and unfortunately couldn't be done. Now, in football over the last couple of days, Jeff, it was Black Monday. You had a lot of coaches dismissed over the last couple of days in college football. We knew that probably wouldn't happen at the Citadel, but have there or will there be any changes on the coaching staff in Jeff Hartsell's opinion?
None that I know of, and none that I feel are necessary, unlike at some other schools. The SoCon did lose a head coach.
Please name, Jeff.
The Gamecocks in Columbia.
Well, they've already made that decision. They
right.
canned their offensive coordinator or something like that.
That is correct, and the quarterback coach
Dan
as well.
Weimer,
yeah. The SoCon did lose a head coach when Mercer fired Bobby Lamb, and I think that's the only coaching change. I know Mark Spear at Western Carolina, he's done what you said and shuffled his assistant coaching staff. I think he fired a couple of guys and is looking to hire maybe a new defensive coordinator. So, but I don't expect any major changes at the Citadel.
All right. Well, again, if you want to know what's going on with the coaching staff, if you want to know anything to do with Bulldog sports, it's Jeff _ from the PC. But more importantly, go to Citadel Sports, which is covered at postandcourier.com. And Jeff, who's been on the beat, well, we'll just say a few years, he will have everything you need to know broken right down at postandcourier.com. So right now, if the coaches are still employed at the Citadel, which it looks like all of them are, we know what they're doing, Jeff. It's recruiting time, and we've got a signing day coming up in just a few days, the early signing period, and then we'll have the official second part of that in February. Jeff, I've got a couple of names. You got a couple of names. And if we've got anybody watching on Facebook Live and they want to chime in with any feedback about recruits, or if you've got a question or comment, I'm sitting here watching our Facebook feed. Feel free to hit us up right now with a question or comment. We welcome that. And we'll just try to answer your questions about anything, but especially with recruiting, since that is a hot topic. Jeff, let's compare notes, my friend. What you got?
Yeah, the early signing date is on December 18th, and Brent Thompson tells me they plan to sign about 10 to 12 players, maybe 7 or 8 of those in the early signing period and the rest in February. The names I have right now as commitments are a couple of kickers, Colby Kinter from Orlando, Florida, and Ben Steele, and I neglected to write down where Ben is from. Maybe you can help me on that. And then a lineman, Cameron Moe, from Jacksonville, 6'3", 250, and a running back, Braden Walker from River Bluff High School in Columbia.
Lexington. Come on now, get it right. That's Lexington.
River Bluff in Lexington, the Columbia area.
Yeah.
5'11", 199 running back. Those are the names I have.
Well, I didn't realize there were more than 2 kickers that were potential signees, so that's great news. Of course, Jacob Godak is moving on and has done a great job in his time in the gates of the Lassane Gate area. So we've got to replace that position. Was there anybody else capable of kicking field goals on the roster this last year?
Yeah, I think Matthew Campbell can do it, and there was another kicker. I can't remember. Gage Russell.
Okay.
No, I can't remember who it was.
Well, I just remember a couple of years ago.
Matthew Campbell could do it.
That field goal kicking position, which I think is underrated at all levels of college football. Go ask Alabama about that one, and other teams that also have missed chip shot field goals to win big games. And Godak, to my knowledge, was signed on scholarship when he first came to the Citadel. Does that sound about right to you?
I think so.
Okay.
And of course, he struggled. I don't know I can't remember if it was his freshman or sophomore season, but then the last 2 years, he's been really super.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be a big deal to replace him. I'm told that the legendary Citadel kicker Greg Davis has something of a pipeline going, so that Citadel fans don't need to worry about kicker in the near future.
Whoa! Breaking news here in all of college football.
That's what Paul Evangelist told me.
Oh well, that sounds great to me. Greg Davis, of course, former Citadel kicker who went on to play in the NFL for the Cardinals and the Atlanta Falcons, among other teams. And from what I have been told about him, he was a very dedicated kicker when he was at the Citadel. He would stay at Johnson-Haygood Stadium when all of the other football players were out on leave and all the other cadets were partying in Charleston. Greg Davis was sitting there on a Saturday night or whenever it was, practicing his field goal kicking at Johnson-Haygood Stadium. And guess what? It paid off for him.
Oh, for sure. And he's something of a kicking guru now with his camps and clinics. And the story I remember about Greg Davis is he used to kick the ball so high that it was tough for the officials to tell if it went through the uprights or not, because he was kicking them way up above the uprights. So they might have misjudged a few of his kicks back in the day.
All right. Well, hopefully that kicking position, which is so important, will be something the Citadel can depend on going forward with these knobs coming in, we hope. And they will be game-winning field goals in the future for the Bulldogs. But let me talk a little bit about the Lexington kids, since that's the area that I claim to as my hometown. And Braden Walker from River Bluff, he was a great fullback for the Gators, as River Bluff, I think, competed with Dutch Fork in the Columbia area for football supremacy this year. And from what I understand about him, he was like one of the Columbia area's best running backs, if not the top running back, and maybe even went on to a Shrine Bowl or something like that. Do you have info on that?
I do not know if he was a Shrine Bowl pick or
Okay.
not. No.
All right. Well, maybe that's not even. Well, the Shrine Bowl ought to be any day now if it hadn't already happened, right?
It's coming up soon.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
It's usually around this time of year. I don't necessarily have my pulse on South Carolina high school football, but this kid is supposedly really good, had other offers, but he's heading to Charleston to play for the Citadel. And we know that not long ago, a certain running back from the Columbia area came down to Charleston and did quite well. Oddly enough, that same running back is in the Columbia area again as an assistant with Ben Lippen, his alma mater, and he also has another job, at least as far as I know, in right down the road from River Bluff High School, working for Orange Therapy. We're talking we're talking Tyler Renew. Travis Jervey, I've got him on my mind too. But yes, good luck to you if indeed these guys sign. And you said again, according to your sources, going to be about 10 to 12 on signing day, this early signing day?
10 to 12 in all in this class.
Oh, okay.
Seven or eight on the early date, and then the rest of the class in February. And of course, they have many more offers out than the 4 commitments that we know of at this point. So there should be some more commitments announced as we head into the December 18th signing day.
All right. And again, a couple of them that I'm aware of, in addition to Walker out of River Bluff and Lexington, you have Cameron James Moe, I think is how it Moe, something like that.
Moe or Mo, I'm not sure.
Moewe is his last name. He's from Jacksonville's Bishop Kenny High School. He's an offensive lineman. And then Colby Kenner, a kicker from Orlando's Olympia High School. Those are among the early commitments that we're aware of. And at the Citadel, and with Jeff's position at post security, we don't exactly have the resources that some of the 24/7 sports and the other rivals.com networks have when it comes to football recruiting, but we do our best.
And the kids like to announce their commitments on Twitter and social media, so there should be some more coming out in the next couple of weeks as we head into signing day.
And Jeff, how big of a deal is this early signing day with the Citadel football community? Meaning, in years past, they would usually have a big deal in February where people were invited. It was kind of a party atmosphere. Are they doing that for this early signing period?
I do not know.
Okay.
I haven't heard of any plans for that, but it has changed the recruiting calendar for sure. It's really pushed everything up. So the coaches have to, and the camps have become really important. The summer camps where they bring in junior prospects and things like that. And they like to get the kids on campus before they make an offer. And they feel like if they can get the kids to come to camp, the chances of getting a commitment go way up.
Yes.
And of course, it's a great opportunity to evaluate those kids as well. I know the lineman from James Island High School, Terrius Drayton, wasn't even on their radar until he showed up at camp. And all of a sudden, they're like, because James Island's an offense, not anything similar to the Citadels. And Terrius showed up at camp, and all of a sudden, whoa, here's this big dude who can really move. So that's how Darius earned his scholarship off Terrius.
Well, I know that camp. We've heard Coach Thompson talk before about kids coming into that camp. They've got your fellow Japanese player, your guy with your high school.
He's not Japanese, but yes.
Well, he's Okinawa.
He went to high school in Okinawa. Yeah.
Come on, let's not
his dad's the Citadel grad, I believe.
I know. Well, Japan could be a new hotbed of college football, but he's technically Okinawa, where you're same high school, and he
knowledge
with the Dragons a lot, I'm sure, from Charleston area. Well, let's talk about the future of Citadel football. When these entire 2020 schedule, Jeff, use your 2020 vision and tell us about 2020's football schedule.
Well, the non-conference will be Elon, the second game home and home. Citadel went to last year. They also will have a home game against Charleston Southern. Not sure of the date on that one yet. So those are non-conference: Elon, Clemson, and Charleston Southern. And then SoCon home games: Sanford, ETU, Chattanooga. like.